The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to another session of our discussion of science at the Doorstep of God by Father Robert Spitzer. Last session, we covered from page 220, page 230. We covered 10 pages. We probably could have read those 10 pages in maybe 14 minutes. It took us a half hour to discuss them. That's fine. And part of the reason we read books is not simply to absorb what's there, but it's kind of springboards to conversation, discussion, entering more deeply into things. So let's proceed. Page 231, the powers of the body. I have something on page 233. If there's nothing before that.
Well, very briefly, I don't want to read anything, but right at the beginning there, he talks about the fact he's taken the top-down approach to understanding the relationship between the body and the soul rather than the bottom-up. In other words, the materialistic approach in insisting that everything begins in physics doesn't get beyond physics, and that doesn't allow us to understand anything. So by beginning from the top down, we can actually understand things. Without that, we can't understand anything. So he explains that's why he's done it this way. In other words, why metaphysics ultimately has to precede physics.
That's an important point because, Thomas Aquinas is perhaps the greatest philosopher theologian of the church's history. But I remember reading him, years ago and having a little sense of malaise because, he brought Aristotle back into philosophy for sure, which was terrific. But he would take these examples from animals, and from animal desires and so on, and then show that applies to humans. It was kind of a bottom-up approach. And I thought in some cases, it seemed to me like, it needed a more top-down, that the fullness of the truth of anything is in God, which we can't know that directly. We don't know God directly. Nevertheless, we can't draw all our concepts from the lowest levels of being because they're not as adequate. It's, God is my rock. That's true. He's also the Lion of Judah. That's true. He's also like a lily, but he's more like a judge or a king or a prophet or a father. Warrior, a father. Yes, that's the most important of all. All right, I'm showing page 233, the top there. As noted in section 4 above, interaction between the soul and the brain likely occurs through quantum mediation and reduction. We've already spoken on that, and I think I said that the difficulty is always, well, how do we reconcile in our minds, in our understanding, the fact that the material world is there, and there's something we experience which cannot be reduced to the material. How do they relate? Mm-hmm. How is it that my mind can move my finger like this, if my finger is material, my mind is immaterial. And he proposes this theorem that is through quantum fluctuations, fluctuations in the quantum field. But just as Descartes tried to unite extended matter and mind through the pineal gland at the back of the neck, which is actually a material thing, and that didn't work. I think trying to unite the spirit and matter, body and soul, through quantum field is another way of reducing the two things to one. And I don't think it ultimately works.
It is reductionism. I wrote something this week, Father, a refutation of some Shakespeare's dubious scholarship on the basis that the earliest extant, discovered document is therefore the first. Well, that's the logical fallacy, right? It's the first, it's the oldest that we've discovered. It's not the first. And I think that the same thing happening here is that also what's the first is also the last, in the sense that wherever the latest discovery is also the final one, right? So so we've now got quantum mechanics, and therefore this is the newest thing. This is the final. This solves and answers all problems. Well, that's fine until 100 years from now we've discovered something else that which makes us realise that our previous understanding was inadequate. If you find an older document, you understand that the previous understanding was inadequate. So I think that we have this logical fallacy that whatever's the newest discovered thing is therefore the truest. In the sense of the absolute truth, which it's probably isn't.
Well, I don't want to align myself with the patent office in the late 1800s, which decided to propose closing it down because everything had been discovered. But I also think that we have this state of progress that we're going to learn more and more and more, right? And produce more and more and have more and more complex technology. Part of that's true. But I will say, maybe this will be recorded somewhere and they'll find it in a time capsule somewhere, that our knowledge is asymptotic. We're now reaching the point where, in principle, it is impossible for us to learn any more about the physical universe in subatomic. We've reached a point where we can't perceive it. We can't get there anymore. We'll see.
Yeah, that's one way. The other way of looking at it is that the fact what you might call psychic inertia, in other words, sin. That what we now have is so much power at our fingertips because of our cleverness that we have the ability to destroy things. And it may well be that we get so clever that we have power, but we don't have virtue. That power then is used to actually destroy everything, and then we have to start again. I mean, that's
we might end up in this.
For Leibowitz, for instance.
Well, there's two ways of not getting to the end. One is every time you build up the building, it collapses. You have to start over again. But the other one is even without that collapse, I'm saying that we've reached a point where there are no possible instruments by which we can penetrate matter further than we have right now. Because
I wasn't disagreeing with you, Father. I was just offering a parallel scenario, both of which could be true, either or.
And also on page 233, about 4 lines down or 5, both the soul and body have independent capacity for sensation, memory, imagination. I don't think that is true.
No.
I don't think angels in themselves can sense things, and therefore that which is spiritual in us of itself has no independent capacity. It has a capacity as the form of the body, I believe. But I'm not sure exactly what he means there. And I want to try and give him the benefit of any doubt. But I would say it's at least ambiguous for me.
Yeah, I think he's tempted to conflate brain and soul sometimes. I'm probably being unfair to him, but things like memory and imagination, perceptual ideas. He spent lots of time previously showing us this proves the existence of the soul. So why is he now trying to say this belongs to the body as well? I mean, he's been trying to show us earlier that it doesn't. That's the whole point.
Well, I have no answer to that, but this question he kind of raises at the bottom of that paragraph, damage to the brain. He's saying that if the physical brain did not have more influence than the soul when the body is healthy, then damage to the brain would not manifest itself in reduced cognitional functioning because the soul would simply take over.
No, it's the vehicle. It's the vehicle.
Right.
But it's in itself, it does not have these things. It's
right.
the vehicle
yes.
by which we.
Right. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that, people who've watched loved ones succumb to things like Alzheimer's and seen like complete personality changes. This person wasn't an angry person. Now this person is. This person has become violent and aggressive, never was like this before. And, it's the deterioration of the brain. And I'm sure it's a very hard, painful thing to watch. And so a woman who was recently widowed asked me, what happened to my husband's beautiful soul? And you know, I don't know.
It's coming in from the other direction. You know that our son doesn't have a debilitating disease. He was born,
Mm-hmm.
with Down syndrome. He's non-vocal. He's broken. I can detect the soul there. I mean, the fact that certain aspects, certain manifestations of the soul require the brain, like walking requires legs, but the soul itself is not the brain. I mean, the brain is
Right.
the physical way by which these things are able to happen.
Right. But it does ask, like Father keeps saying, it's a mystery. It's such an unsatisfying answer that we kind of want to know, where did that man's soul go, or what? Anyway.
I have a smartphone here, which does everything except work for phone calls. I mean, it takes pictures. I can get on the internet. You can listen to my voice and so on. But the speaker doesn't work. I have to put it on speakerphone to hear.
Oh.
But so what happens though is, if I'm talking to someone on speakerphone, there's intelligence manifested there. I mean, words are being used and sentences and so on. If I get in a bad zone, all of a sudden I get static or it breaks up.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as if the spiritual reality has been diminished.
Mm-hmm.
It's my receptor is defective.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, in a sense, the bodily organs are those receptors by which the soul both receives information and transmits information. But if I get knocked unconscious, I can't hear or I can't speak, or likewise Alzheimer's, all those things. So it doesn't, the soul, our spiritual faculties in our life here are dependent upon the development, functioning, and quality of our physical organs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you can't reduce them
to that.
to those things.
That's a very good way.
Insofar as we have to hope that children that have been aborted, or miscarriages, or children that are handicapped, or people that suffer from dementia or other debilitating illnesses, that we can no longer have the relationship with them soul to soul that we would like. That we have to believe that the soul transcends those physical limitations, and that soul will be fully realized in the presence of God.
And now we can see how important it is to have, as a matter of dogma, the resurrection of the body. Because if the human soul needs a human body to be actualized, or however you want to say that, then that means in the next life, we actually are going to need our bodies back. Because the human person is this integration of a soul and a body.
Perfect, unbroken bodies that are not subject to entropy.
Right.
And one might ask the question, what will these risen bodies be like? And Paul discusses that directly in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, around verse 33 or 34, somewhere in there. That's a foolish question, he says, but he answers it. I think I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. He gives the image of a seed that goes into the ground and becomes a plant. And when you think about it, we only know what those seeds have become because we buy them in a package with a picture on the front. If you'd never seen a seed before and someone gave you, what's that? A little bit of matter, we'll put it in the ground, see what happens, We wouldn't even say plant it because the word plant comes from a plant, right? And then this little seed grows into, let's say, a rose bush. There's no way you could have predicted the rose bush from any analysis of the seed, right? And so Paul says our risen bodies will be more unlike our physical bodies now than a rose bush is to the seed. And yet there'll be a continuity there. It won't be some other rose bush. It'll be me, the rose bush,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Father Fessio is the mystical rose. Whatever next.
So what, mystical rose, human freedom, anything here?
I actually don't think I have anything now until the conclusion myself.
Yeah, we've already discussed these other things. He does give us, by the way, means by which we can strengthen our wills. Did you notice that? He mentions St. Paul on 239, which I mentioned at the last meeting, this conflict we feel within ourselves that we don't do what we really will to do or would like to do and do things we don't. So now he says, he's still talking about the difference between involuntary factors that are very difficult to change. That's on 240. Limits of our bodies and psychological factors, personality disorders, But he's saying there are also several involuntary factors that can be changed. So now he's going to give us a little practicum. You think you're reading all this abstract stuff. And now Father Spitzer, the Jesuit formator, gives us a practicum to follow. And what are those things? I just thought that was such a pleasant surprise to find this in this book that can be changed. The strength of sensual and egotistical desires, weakness of the will, some subconscious beliefs. A lot of people are in a hopeless state thinking they'll never change. There's nothing they can do at all. Maybe you can't make yourself perfect, but you can make progress. I found this a very hopeful little, and then the things he gives, visualization and affirmation techniques. Whoa, what's that? Good habits and virtues. Okay. Prayer and grace. And then he concludes, can we be perfectly free? Evidently not. However, we will be more free, and in some cases, much more free, to move from freedom to freedom. I thought of Paul's glory to glory. Yeah. We are actually getting somewhere, thank God.
Although I've heard it said, if you're not moving forward in the spiritual life, you're moving backward. To which I reply, treading water takes a lot of work.
Oh, it does.
And just not getting worse, I believe, is a victory.
Yeah.
It's not drowning,
Here's the thing. Treading water, I used to tread a lot of water. I was in synchronized swimming as a sport in high school. Yeah, synchronized swimming and water ballet. It was not an Olympic sport then, so we got no respect. But now that it is an Olympic sport, now I can impress people. But in any case, I can assure you, treading water, because that's what you have to get stronger and stronger and stronger at to do any of those things. Just treading water makes you stronger.
And it's hard work. I tell you, I dived into a lake. I'm getting older, and started swimming away from the boat towards the shore, and realized I wasn't going to get there. So that I started treading water. Well, I just tread water until I've got my breath back, and I'll carry on swimming again. Well, treading water also requires a little bit of effort, right? So, by the time I was very relieved when I finally managed, by swimming a few strokes, treading water, to actually find some solid ground under my feet, and I wasn't going to drown. And I've taken treading water much more seriously since then.
For sure. And then if you don't have the strength to tread water, there's the dead man's float,
Yes,
which takes even less energy.
I think I did that as well at some point.
Yeah, that takes even less energy than if you're trying to conserve your strength. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the practicum, which is a good conclusion to all this theoretical material. He has number 6, the conclusion. We summarize it basically. We know that. Now comes the chapter or the section called conclusion, which he repeats himself, which is good. This is a good, summary of the book. But I don't think we need to go into that.
I don't think so either.
I'm pleased that he concludes as he began with John Henry Newman's Grandmother Sent, as the approach is taken, and I think that's good. But then you're right, he's just very, very good here at showing us what he's done in the previous 250 pages. It's great.
And he also takes a little bit of an evangelism turn, if you will, by, emphasizing in more than one place, I circled it in more than one place, that God is personal. He's a person who wants a relationship with us. And then this beautiful line, on page 248, in the middle paragraph, the highest way, he's quoting this Friedrich Heiler, The highest way to eternal bliss in the transcendent reality is through love. If so, then Christianity has a very strong case to be the highest self-revelation of God on the basis of the moral religious criterion that Jesus called the greatest commandment, lying at the foundation of the entire law and prophets.
Yeah, and if I can say, just a way of concluding the conclusion, and give a commercial to a book that I don't think has been published yet. If you don't mind, I would like to read the final paragraph, because this is a book that I hope we might read in the Form Book Club when it's available. So in the final paragraph of the conclusion, he writes, in a companion volume to this one, Science, the Doorstep of Christ.
Time out, just right there. Sorry. We're changing the title of that.
Okay.
It's going to be, you know, off the top of your hand,
No.
top of your head, top
No.
of anything. Anyway, there is going to be a sequel, and but it won't have this title. Just heads up on that. But
so
still
the
watch
companion
for it.
volume to this one, titled To Be Determined,
Yes.
I investigate the evidence for Jesus on the basis of 3 objective methods. First, I examine the historical and logical evidence for Jesus' claim to be the exclusive Son of his divine Father, implying that he is the height of God's self-revelation. We then turn to the scientific corroboration of this claim, the scientific investigation of the Shroud of Turin, chapter 3, 3 transformed Eucharistic hosts, chapter 4, the Tilma and image of Guadalupe, chapter 5, the miracle of the Son of Fatima, chapter 5 also apparently, and several scientifically inexplicable cures at Lourdes, chapter 6. When this evidence is set within yet another informal inference of John Henry Newman, it implies strongly that Jesus Christ is not only the height of God's self-revelation, but also the risen and present Lord. So not only is my appetite already whetted, but taking this scientific approach to the revelation and the gospel, I'm not aware. I'm sure it's been done. I'm not aware of ever having read this approach in one volume. You can have, different people. The Miracle of the Sun shows this, and Shroud of Turin shows this, and the Tilma shows this. But putting it all together within the pages of one book is something which I'm very, very much looking forward to reading.
I think you're right. I mean, it may have been done before, but who knows if it has, but he certainly does it well. The Newmanian approach of taking different methods that lead to the same conclusion. Yeah. I would say the appendix has 2 kind of sections. One has to do with Adam and Eve, who are first parents alike. And the second one has to do with, are there aliens? Could there be aliens from other planets, and what should we think about them, their possible existence? And I would say let's cover that briefly, unless anyone wants to go into greater detail. But on the first, I would say we're all African Americans in America. Looks like we all came from Africa, right? I kind of had to smile on page 262, middle, just below the middle there. Seeking more favorable climatic conditions, our ancestors moved progressively southward down to the southernmost tip of South America, inhabiting an area of southern Argentina between 11,064 and 13,068. Really? Did they have a diary or something with a calendar on it?
Yeah, this is my problem. They were saying about the earliest piece. This is all very neat. We have the mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam, the Y chromosome Eve and the Y chromosome Adam. Sorry. Mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam lived about the same time, and came from a similar region in Africa. Well, between 150,000, 200,000 years ago. So then we have this sort of human biologically who's not a human with a soul, all right? And then at some time after that, our first ensouled ancestors lived between 50,000 and 65,000 years ago, about 100 to 150,000 years after our genetic ancestors. This is, to me, this is taking the latest theories based upon the pieces of the puzzle, most of which are missing, that we've discovered, and drawing all sorts of dogmatic conclusions that I just don't think that we know. So I just think that we should be agnostic in a healthy sense and say these are theories, and he's not talking in terms of theories. These are presented as facts, and I just have an issue with things that are quite clearly theoretical, based upon the oldest, no, the oldest or latest piece of evidence being the final piece of evidence, which we draw sweeping dogmatic conclusions from. I just think we need to be more humble in the face of our discoveries than to just think we have a universal truth based upon the latest things we've discovered.
But we
Because
always
if you look
desire to
at
know
history,
more.
you see we make ourselves look silly.
And I think what is highly probable scientifically is that there were organisms similarly genetically to ours, before there were signs of human consciousness like graves and certain kinds of tools and so on. And so that much I think we can feel fairly certain about. Exactly what the lineage was and how it took place and what year it took place. I mean, certainly not in 14,064 did they suddenly set foot in Argentina. I mean, that would be
right. What he's saying that because of this Arroyo Seco archaeological dig,
right.
They've discovered that humans inhabited that place 14,000 years ago based on carbon dating of the artifacts they find and things like that. But when they are, like, to your point, when they arrived there, how do we know when they arrived there? How, and to your point also, remember when they found that guy frozen in the Alps? They called him, what they call him, the Iceman or something like that. And he was frozen inside of a glacier, and it was the receding of the glacier that his mummified almost remains were discovered, and all of the headlines were, we have to completely rechart our timelines on the Stone Age and on this and on that, because this latest discovery now, we have to rewrite textbooks over when we've placed these ages of man and so on. So you're absolutely right, Joseph, and Father both, that, I mean, on one hand, it's kind of cool when these things get discovered. And like you say, Father, we have an unsatiable desire to learn more and discover things. We just have to be careful not making that the final word on the subject.
It reminds me very much of the whole thesis of Chesterton's The Everlasting Man, and particularly that first chapter, The Man in the Cave, all right, is that we draw all sorts of sweeping conclusions that are really myth, in the sense that we are making up stories based upon the facts that we see.
Right.
And then some more facts arrive, then we have to change the story. And bear in mind, you look at the past, and you know that very likely in the future we'll find other pieces of the puzzle which will completely change the story. So it's very dangerous, I think, for Father Spitzer here to be assuming that the latest discoveries are the final discoveries, because they're probably not, on the basis of previous evidence.
Chesterton puts it so well in Everlasting Man, because at the time in the 20s and 30s, there were a lot of these speculations and pictures of the caveman, and Chesterton would say, well, who could suspect that this figure, whose very hairs are numbered and whose wrinkles are portrayed, is actually a portrait of a fragment of a skull, reconstructed out of that. All right. How about possible existence of aliens? He says on page 266 about the age of the stars and so on. If these estimates of the vast age of the universe, including stars and possible livable planets, are correct, and something like a trans-universal intelligence front-loaded program, the laws and operation of biology, life in a universe of the Big Bang. So again, see, you can't think about God in time. God doesn't preload anything. If there's going to be a development inside of time, God is doing it simultaneously. It's not as if God puts a program in the Big Bang which then of its own accord unfolds and develops into life. No. The very unfolding of the Big Bang is the immortal, eternal, timeless act of God's creation. He's creating now
Yes.
just as much as he did in the past.
Yes.
No past in God, 14.8 billion years, 13.8 billion years ago.
Look,
So that's a concern. He does say below that, however, it must be cautioned that this conclusion is highly speculative. I would say, yeah, way highly speculative.
Yeah.
And then on page 269, he talks about what if we do find people that, other intelligent life? Towards the bottom there, he says, if we encounter aliens that have this sense of spiritual emptiness, alienation, and loneliness, as well as a dread of death, then it is likely that one of their ancestors committed an original sin that negatively affected their relation with God, his influence on them, and their willingness to follow him. Well, again, theologically, I hold to St. Paul, Romans chapter 5. Through the sin of one man, death came into the world. There's no part of the cosmos which is unfallen.
Right. Laws of physics, entropy. That's what I've written. Right under what you just read, I've written the word entropy.
Okay.
Right. So above that, Father, inasmuch, this is page 269 to about 10 lines further up. Inasmuch as these aliens are free, we cannot possibly know whether they would have committed an original sin until we ask them. The point is, if they're living in a fallen cosmos,
That's right.
they are going to be fallen. It's as simple as that. There's not. You're not going to have unfallen things within a broken, fallen physical cosmos. They're not broken and fallen. I mean, to me, it's obvious.
And of course, Lewis very brilliantly did describe Mars as unfallen, Venus as unfallen, but experiencing the temptation and overcoming it, and then Earth as surrounded by the moon being kind of the sphere orbit in which our fallenness occurs. But that was purely imaginative on his part.
It's a fairy story.
Yeah. But there's a lot of truth in it, even this fairy story.
Well, of course. Yeah. Fairy stories contain a great deal of truth.
So, this has been a great stimulus to discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I hope there's others who've been watching and listening because we've enjoyed it. We are next going to discuss Dare We Hope That All Men Be Saved, which has a much nicer cover now in our new edition of this. Mm-hmm. But I'm using my old one here. And we will, I think, probably the first couple of chapters will occupy us, the issue and the charge in the New Testament. And of course, just to whet your appetite a bit, what is the charge against von Balthasar? That all men are saved and that hell is empty. We will see to what extent those charges can be proven in this trial by jury here. And we're all the jury. Thanks. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.